Great.
On this computer.
Yeah, it's going.
Okay, we're going. Hello, Deepa. Thank you for joining me this morning. And I've promised to all of our Collective Heart members that we'll do our best to get some updates on what's happening over there at Ashraya. But and Collective Heart have been offering monthly sponsorship for about since we actually started, which is about 4 years ago. So
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and and we offered a little bit extra lately because we know things are particularly difficult just at this point in time. But there's a heap of our members that have never met you. They don't know too much about you. So can we just start not with Ashraya but with Deepa and learn a little bit maybe about about you. What your interests are, and maybe if you can also share with us how you came in touch with Ashraya and your involvement these days.
Yeah. So I grew up in Sydney until the age of 20, and my parents migrated just a couple of months before I was born. And both of my parents are from small places in India, and my dad actually grew up in a lot of poverty. So whenever I went back to India every year or two, I grew up in a life that had a big contrast. And even though by Aussie standards we weren't well off at that period of my life, by Indian standards we were really well off. So when I think of how I've come across Ashraya, it comes from a background of actually living what it means to navigate such stark differences in access in general and access that is provided by money. And so I came across Ashraya with through Yogic Wisdom, through Lakshmi, when she was holding a retreat back in 2011 was the first time. And it just so happened to be that I had moved to Bangalore around the same time, and so I had the great privilege of and I've lived in Bangalore now on and off for 6 years, so I've had the great privilege of kind of living in the same place as Ashraya and getting to build an authentic relationship. So now for me they feel like family. I feel like the kids are kind of part of my emotional system, and Leela is like an aunt or an older sister.
Yeah. So to clarify, Ashraya is based in Bangalore in India. And so that contrast growing up, so you grew up in Sydney. You said that your family didn't have a lot, but you had enough, is what I'm hearing. And then you go back to India, and you sort of saw this real contrast. Was that difficult for you? Was there a part of you that part of your heart was kind of really opened up from seeing the extremes that sometimes people experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember my first, when I was 6. I had been to India prior to that, but I think there was something about that trip where I remember my dad was giving out some food, and I remember the desperation with which people were chasing after him just to get one sweet. And look, I want to be very clear, not everyone in India is poor, but there is a large amount of people who do live in poverty, and some percentage of that who live in abject poverty, where you're experiencing hunger. And there was something about that where I was shocked at the desperation that someone would have to survive, and I'd never been confronted with that, or if I had no memory of it. And I think after that, I think just the way I saw the world changed, and I felt so called to do something to contribute to others. And then got so many opportunities. We're so lucky in Australia that there's so many opportunities, even as a kid, to learn to raise money for charities and to become educated and to support one another. So yeah.
So can you tell me a little bit about Ashraya or what's happening over there at the moment? Because the last 6 or 8 months with the COVID, well, is it 8 months? It could even be a little bit more than that now with the COVID pandemic, which has pretty heavy effect on lots of different parts of the world. But in terms of specifically, Bangalore, maybe, the kids at Ashraya, how Leela's, trying to accommodate any sort of movement restrictions, restrictions in terms of what do they call it? Sort of like
lockdown?
Lockdown. Yeah. What do you understand of the situation there?
Yeah, so basically, the kids have been locked up in a house for a very long period of time. And like it's as Leela reports to me, they're both going crazy being in a house and like not being able to go outside and play, and at the same time are really happy that they don't have to study. So
so kids are kids, right? Doesn't matter.
Yeah, so they're entertaining each other, and like they're also like, she's pulling her hair out with them. And so when I talk to her, she's obviously very distressed at how much uncertainty and financial vulnerability they have at the moment, which is unusual. Like, having gone through the entire history of Ashraya, they've had moments of financial vulnerability, but this level of sustained vulnerability is actually unusual in its history.
And why is that? Is that because the expenses have been affected, or is that because the amount of beneficiaries they have is reduced? So why has it become particularly difficult now?
So it's a combination. Like, when you started supporting Ashraya, the school had about 200 kids 4 years ago.
Yeah.
It now has 360 or 380. So, the number of kids they're supporting, obviously in the last 20 years, has like steadily increased from a few dozen to now, so many. So that has very proportionate costs associated with it, including like more teachers in addition to like food and whatever. That's with the school. With the orphanage, it's a different story. And then the other side is, there's three main factors that have affected their income in the last 5 years. So I would say, from the time that you guys started supporting Ashraya, it was very, very fortunate, because it was actually the beginning of the decline of other sources of support. And it's just a combination of things. One is the government went through a demonetization process where they changed all the currency to fight corruption in the form of fake currency. But it just meant that a lot of people who supported it affected charitable institutions a lot, in terms of how people saw how they were using their money. So they just happened to be losers of what was an initiative for another purpose. And then secondly, like, some of their donors who've been around for the last 20 years have just gotten old. So some of them have passed away or have had their financial beneficiaries passed away, so they can't provide that support. And Leela is also getting older and has more health issues. So I think her capacity to bring in new people, it's just different to what it is when you're in your 20s or in your 30s when you're doing this stuff. And then COVID. I mean, basically, like, everyone is struggling, and every time I've asked for help, anyone in India, the response is, we're all struggling. We don't have funding to, like, so many teachers have lost jobs. It's not just Australia, it's actually an industry-wide thing where the government is like huge NGOs that provide support for thousands of public schools don't have funding to support the teachers. Because in India, the government doesn't do support, like, doesn't do education on its own. It does it in partnership with a lot of nonprofits to achieve its education goals. And so, some of the biggest NGOs that work in partnership with the government also are not able to meet a lot of these things.
So there's several factors which so we have basically a growth in the school and and just the direct costs associated with that, but also a little bit of a shrinkage in terms of where monies could be sourced from, and also the capacity of those sources.
Yeah, and at the moment, like keeping people alive with food is more important than education. Like there's just a hierarchy, and
Yeah. So can you talk about that a little bit for us? So at the moment, the
yep,
school's closed.
yep, the school's closed,
Yeah.
and that's because of COVID. That it's not the government has mandated for it to be closed. The last date I got was it's closed until October.
Uh,
But that date was previously July, which is like it's been a moving target. And knowing what the situation is like in India and the fact that the count is rising, I personally don't expect it to open up this year. Like I think we're
right.
talking about 2021 at
Mm,
best.
mm. And what's happening at the orphanage then? Is it hard to get enough food in for the kids, or what's the situation there?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, first of all, I don't think I've had a chance to thank you and thank your whole community for the recent additional support that you gave. And also just like I still remember from I think it was 2016 that the class-based support
Yeah.
started as well, and that has been so like. And this is one of those things where like I wish you could hear Leela's voice. There is so much gratitude from her, where she just feels like that God is looking after her essentially
Yeah.
through the grace of angels. And so I just want to pass on that feeling of thank you for being the angels for these kids and for this community.
Thank you for sharing that, Deepa. That gives me goosebumps.
Yeah, I'm getting teary as I say that.
Yeah. Look, I try to convey that to our
Yeah,
guys, and they know that they're appreciated for the works that they do. Um, but I'm sure they'll be very appreciative to hear it from you as well.
yeah, because at this point, given all the challenges, like our community in Australia is, you know, almost all they have.
Right.
And so, while the situation on schooling for Ashraya and obviously for more of India is a question, um, they haven't gone hungry.
Yeah.
And not only have they not gone hungry, they've been able to get some nutrition beyond just rice. Like rice and lentils are the cheapest thing, but the
Mm.
fact that we've been able to support them in getting vegetables and having electricity and phone and internet so I can actually call them, like those are not um, those are not things we can take for granted in this situation. And so there's a huge blessing in just even what we're able to provide, and that
Mm.
additional like money that you guys gave recently, just like at least for a 1 to 2 month period, just took the edge off. Like there's been so much stress around paying bills and
Right.
like paying so many bills on IOUs and waiting for the next installment of money to come in. So it's just
Mm.
nice to go for a month, not having to pay for groceries on IOUs and just being able to like clear debts and pay, like, yeah. So there's a
Yeah.
lot of gratitude for that as well.
Yes. Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that, and it's nice that we could do something. It's nice that we have some resources. Um, might not solve all the problems, but hopefully it helps to some extent. Can you tell me a
Yeah.
little? Can you tell me a little bit about the orphanage? How many kids are there at the moment? I assume some of the students from school have gone back to villages and these things because not all of the students live at the orphanage. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the orphanage has 70 kids and the school has 300 and something. I forget the number.
Mm,
Um, and the rest of those kids are just kids who are in that community with parents
right.
or like families that they live with that aren't orphans at kids who are orphaned at Ashraya.
Mm,
Um, Out of the kids that were at Ashraya, a few who have relatives were actually sent to stay with their relatives right when the lockdown started, um, just to kind of ease the burden of trying to manage so many children in one place.
yeah.
But yeah, most of them are at the orphanage in Australia in Bangalore.
Right. Okay. Well, it's lovely to talk to you. It's lovely to hear a little bit more about what's going on. Oh, one thing I didn't ask anything about is we're aware that there's some court proceedings about what's going on with the school grounds. That's on hold at the moment, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
courts are closed and a lot of government functions are still shut down. So
Yeah,
that's just.
okay. Well, keep us posted on that. And one other thing, did you say something about manufacturing bags or something along those
Oh
lines?
yeah, yeah. So in the last few weeks, I haven't gotten the details on this. They've started making and selling bags.
Yeah.
I don't know how many they're selling or at what rate they're producing the bags. But what I will do is I'll send you photos. I think they're just in like an experimental trying to figure it out phase, and it's the initiative of not Leela, but some of the younger students who graduate, some of the younger kids who are at the orphanage who then graduated from the school now actually work to support the orphanage. So one of those kids, I mean, I guess he's not a kid anymore. He was a kid. Uh, I think it's his initiative. Like they have all these creative ideas of how they want to try and financially find other
Yeah.
income streams.
Yeah, fantastic. Isn't that a nice
Yeah,
story? That's a
yeah,
student's come through and wants to continue to contribute and is looking for creative ways to achieve that.
yeah. And it's not a lot. Like it's nothing compared to I think like in amount of finance, but I think it's an empowering thing to do. And
Yes.
every little bit counts.
Yeah. In fact, one of the groups that we support, he's in the Philippines. One of the things they do is they make bags as well.
Oh, wonderful.
They make them out of recycled, like fruit juice containers. Not
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah.
the sort
Tetra
of
packs.
yeah, like those. So they're made out of that.
Oh, wonderful. If you have
Mm.
any photos, I can forward it on to them. Like they're
Yeah.
creative. So,
Okay. Yeah, we'll organise that. All right. Do you have anything
yeah,
else you'd
okay.
like to add for our guys?
Nothing I can think of right now. It was really wonderful connecting, and yeah, thank you so much. It's so wonderful to be connected to you all.
Well, I appreciate your time and your sharing, and maybe we can touch base maybe once a quarter or something like that, and just have a little
Yeah,
bit of an update. Would that be okay?
yeah, sounds great.
Okay. Well, I wish you well, and I wish you. How about this? How about I do my best to pass on the love and the care that we have as a group to all of the kids and Leela and all of the people involved with Ashraya and all of the people that are closely related and help in whatever way that they can.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, Deepa. Thanks for catching up with us.
Bye.
Bye.